There is an animal alive today that was already ancient when dinosaurs still walked the earth. It has survived mass extinctions, shifting continents, oceans that no longer exist, and a planet that has changed almost beyond recognition. Yet it still follows a path it somehow never forgets. Sea turtles begin their lives in darkness, buried beneath warm sand. They hatch all at once and race toward an ocean they have never seen. They do not hesitate. They do not search. They move with certainty. Most of them will not survive that first journey. Predators wait in the sky, along the shore, and beneath the water. For many, life ends within minutes. But for the few that make it, something even more difficult to explain begins. They disappear, not for days, not for months, for years, sometimes decades. They cross entire oceans, drifting through a world with no roads, no landmarks, no visible paths, a place that should erase all direction. And then, after all that time, they return, not just to the same coastline, not even to the same region. They return to the exact place where their life began, often within only a few meters of where they hatched. Scientists have followed them across thousands of miles of open water. The journeys are real, the precision is real, but the full explanation is still incomplete. Because whatever guides them is something they are born with, something invisible, something tied to the planet itself. And once you begin to look closely at how they live, how they survive, and how they find their way across an ocean that offers no guidance at all, it becomes clear that this is not just a story about survival. It is a story about something far older than memory, something still moving quietly through the oceans today. Along the edges of warm oceans, where land softens into quiet arcs of sand, there are stretches of shoreline that hold a kind of silent importance. These places are not marked by anything obvious. No visible boundary separates them from the countless other beaches shaped by wind and tide. Yet beneath their surface, something precise and enduring continues, guided by conditions that have remained stable across vast spans of time. These beaches lie mostly within tropical and subtropical regions, where sunlight lingers and the seasons move without extremes. The sand here holds warmth differently, neither too cool nor overwhelmingly hot, maintaining a delicate balance that supports life before it has even begun. The grains themselves, shaped by erosion and carried by currents, create a texture that allows air to pass while still offering protection. Moisture settles at just the right depth, preventing dryness without flooding what rests below. Not every coastline can serve this role. Even small differences in temperature, slope, or composition can make a place unsuitable. A beach that appears identical to the eye may hold conditions that disrupt development or shift survival in subtle ways. Over time, certain shores have become part of an unbroken pattern, returned to again and again without guidance or memory in the human sense. Their suitability is not accidental, but the result of countless generations shaped by what works and what does not. The temperature of the sand carries a quiet influence that reaches beyond simple incubation. Within the buried chambers, it determines the balance of life itself. Slight variations can guide whether more males or females will emerge, a process tied not to chance, but to the steady warmth surrounding each developing form. A few degrees can alter the outcome entirely, making the beach not just a place of birth, but a silent regulator of future generations. As daylight fades and the air cools, the shoreline begins to change. Movement returns, though it remains almost imperceptible at first. The surface appears undisturbed, yet from the water's edge, slow forms begin to emerge. This timing is not random. Night offers protection, lowering the presence of predators that rely on sight, while the cooler sand reduces stress on bodies not built for prolonged exposure above water. The ascent from sea to shore unfolds with a measured certainty. Each movement presses weight into the sand, leaving marks that will soon be erased by wind or tide. There is no hesitation, no visible searching for direction. The path leads to a place beyond the reach of incoming waves, where the sand remains stable and dry enough to hold what will be left behind. Here, beneath the quiet surface, the process begins in stillness. The sand is shaped and shifted with deliberate motion, forming a chamber hidden from the world above. The depth is neither shallow nor excessive, but exact, allowing warmth to penetrate while shielding from temperature extremes. Once complete, the surface returns to its previous appearance, concealing any sign of disturbance. These beaches remain largely unchanged in their role, even as the wider world continues to shift. Storms reshape their edges, currents deposit new layers, and winds carry grains across their surface. Yet the essential qualities persist, maintained through a balance that does not rely on permanence, but on continual renewal. In this quiet cycle, there is no visible signal marking significance. The importance of these places exists beneath the surface, carried in temperature, texture, and timing. What appears as an ordinary stretch of sand holds within it the conditions necessary for a life that begins unseen, shaped by forces that do not announce themselves, yet remain precisely aligned with what is required. Far out in open water, long before any shoreline becomes visible, a subtle shift begins within the body of a mature female. It is not triggered by sight or sound, but by an internal rhythm that has been building quietly over years. Muscles that carried her across vast distances now guide her toward a destination that exists as more than a place. It is a point of return, drawn not from memory in the usual sense, but from something embedded far deeper. As she approaches land, the water grows shallower and more textured, shaped by currents that meet resistance from the coast. The surface breaks differently here, and beneath it the seafloor rises gradually. She moves through this transition with steady purpose, adjusting her path without hesitation. When the moment aligns, she enters the narrow boundary where ocean yields to sand. The act of leaving the water is slow and deliberate. Her body, built for buoyancy, carries its full weight now against gravity. Each movement presses firmly into the ground, forming a trail that stretches behind her. The effort is immense, yet uninterrupted. She advances above the reach of the tide, selecting a place that holds the right conditions without any visible marker. Once settled, she begins to shape the surface beneath her. Using her front flippers, she clears away loose sand, creating a shallow depression. The motion is rhythmic, repeated with quiet precision, as if guided by an internal measure rather than conscious adjustment. When the upper layer is prepared, her hind flippers take over, moving in alternating patterns to carve a deeper chamber. This excavation is exact in both depth and form. The cavity narrows as it descends, forming a space that will cradle what is placed within it. Each movement is controlled, the sand lifted and released without collapsing the structure. The process unfolds in near silence, interrupted only by the soft shifting of grains. When the chamber is complete, stillness settles for a brief moment. Then, without pause, the next phase begins. One by one, the eggs are released, descending into the space below. Their number grows steadily, often exceeding 100, forming a clustered mass that fills the chamber almost entirely. Each egg is soft-shelled and flexible, adapting to the shape of those around it. There is no variation in pace, no interruption in the sequence. The laying continues until the chamber is filled to its natural limit. Throughout this process, there is no attention given to the surface or to the world beyond the immediate task. Everything remains focused on the quiet placement of life beneath the sand. Once the final egg settles, The covering begins. The hind flippers return to motion, drawing sand back into the chamber with careful control. Layer by layer, the space is sealed, restoring the surface to a state that reveals nothing of what lies beneath. The sand is pressed and smoothed, compact enough to protect, yet loose enough to allow the passage of air. The work does not end there. She continues to move sand across the area, scattering it beyond the immediate site. This motion obscures the precise location, blending the nest into the surrounding terrain. The original disturbance fades into a broader pattern of marks that will soon be erased by wind or tide. When the process is complete, there is no pause to observe or return. The connection between mother and what has been left behind exists only in the act itself. Without turning back, she begins the slow journey toward the water, retracing no exact path, guided only by the presence of the ocean ahead. As her body re-enters the sea, the weight lifts and movement becomes fluid once more. The shoreline recedes behind her, returning to stillness. Beneath the surface of the sand, the chamber remains undisturbed, holding within it a quiet beginning that will unfold without her presence. Beneath the surface, where light no longer reaches, and movement above becomes only a distant pressure, a quiet transformation unfolds. The chamber remains still, its shape holding steady against the weight of the sand, while within each egg, life begins in forms too small to perceive without careful study. Time passes here without visible markers. There is no sunrise or fading light, only a gradual exchange of heat between the surrounding grains and what rests inside. The incubation period stretches across weeks, sometimes longer, depending on the subtle conditions held within the sand. Warmth moves slowly through this enclosed space, neither constant nor uniform, but gently shifting as the environment above responds to changing air and weather. Inside each egg, a network of cells begins to organize. The process follows a pattern encoded long before the egg was formed, unfolding in stages that do not require guidance from the outside. Early structures appear, fragile and indistinct, then gradually refine into recognizable forms. A spine takes shape, followed by the outline of flippers, the beginnings of a shell, and the quiet rhythm of a developing heart. This growth depends entirely on the balance maintained around it. The temperature of the sand does more than sustain development. It influences the future composition of those that will emerge. Slight differences, often only a few degrees, guide whether the majority will become male or female. Warmer conditions tend to produce more females, while cooler environments shift the balance in the opposite direction. This regulation occurs without intention, shaped only by the physical properties of the beach and the conditions of the season. Moisture also plays a quiet role, moving through the sand in thin layers that neither saturate nor dry completely. It allows for the exchange of gases, ensuring that oxygen reaches the developing embryos while carbon dioxide diffuses outward. The shell, though soft, forms a boundary that protects without sealing entirely, maintaining a connection between the life inside and the environment beyond. Despite this delicate balance, vulnerability remains constant. The chamber offers concealment, but not complete security. Shifts in temperature can alter development. Storms can compact the sand or erode the surface, and unseen predators may disturb what lies below. Even without disturbance, not every embryo will complete its formation. Some will stop at early stages, while others may develop partially but fail to continue. Within those that persist, changes accumulate steadily. Pigmentation forms along the shell, limbs strengthen, and the body begins to fill the available space. The yolk sac, once a dominant presence, gradually diminishes as its stored energy is absorbed. Each movement becomes more defined, though still contained within the limited space of the egg. As the incubation period nears its end, the environment within the chamber shifts in subtle ways. The developing hatchlings begin to occupy more space, pressing gently against one another. The sand above remains undisturbed, yet below, a quiet readiness builds, shaped by timing rather than signal. There is no external cue that announces completion. Instead, it emerges from within as each individual reaches a stage where the structure of the egg can no longer contain it. The boundary that once provided protection becomes the final barrier to overcome. In this enclosed world, life has taken form without ever encountering the open air or the movement of the ocean. It has developed entirely within darkness, guided by temperature, moisture, and the steady passage of time. The chamber remains still, holding within it a collection of lives that have never seen the surface, yet are already shaped by the conditions that surround them. A faint stirring begins in the confined space below, not as a single action, but as many small movements unfolding at once. Within the clustered chamber, each fully formed hatchling presses gently against the boundary that has held it until now. The shell, once a flexible protection, has become a thin barrier that can no longer contain the growing strength inside. At the tip of each small beak, a temporary structure forms, known as the caruncle. It is not permanent, but it serves a precise purpose. With slow, repeated motions, the hatchling taps against the inner surface of the shell, creating fine cracks that spread gradually outward. The process is not immediate. It unfolds over hours, sometimes longer, as the shell weakens and finally gives way. Once the opening forms, the hatchling pushes through, entering a space already shared with others. There is no isolation here. Each individual emerges into a collective presence, surrounded by siblings at different stages of the same process. The chamber fills with subtle movement, a quiet shifting as more shells break and more bodies enter the open space. This emergence is not synchronized in exact timing, yet it converges into a shared phase. Those that hatch earlier do not leave immediately. Instead, they remain within the chamber, their movements slowing as they wait. The reason for this delay lies in both physiology and coordination. The yolk sac, which has provided nourishment throughout development, continues to be absorbed during this period. Remaining still allows this final stage to complete, strengthening the hatchling before the effort ahead. As more individuals join, the chamber becomes increasingly active. The collective presence creates small pockets of movement that influence the surrounding sand. Each motion shifts grains slightly, loosening the structure above. Over time, these individual actions combine into a gradual change in the chamber's stability. The concept of group emergence takes form here, not through communication in any deliberate sense, but through the accumulation of many independent movements. When enough hatchlings have fully emerged from their shells and completed their internal absorption, the group begins to act as a single unit. The sand above, once compact, starts to yield under the combined pressure. This process unfolds slowly. There is no sudden break or collapse. Instead, the hatchlings take turns, moving upward, creating space that others follow. The chamber rises incrementally as the sand settles beneath and shifts above. Each individual contributes to a shared pathway, even without awareness of the whole. Timing plays a subtle role in this ascent. Movement tends to intensify as external conditions become more favorable, though the hatchlings do not perceive the world above directly. Temperature gradients and slight changes in the sand provide cues that align their activity with cooler periods, often during the night. This synchronization reduces exposure to harsh surface conditions once they emerge. As the upper layers thin, the presence of the surface becomes closer, though still unseen. The sand grows looser and the resistance decreases. One by one, the hatchlings approach this boundary, their movements becoming more directed as the final distance shortens. Beneath the surface, the chamber that once held stillness has transformed into a place of quiet motion and coordination. The shells, now broken and empty, remain behind as fragments of an earlier stage. Above, the sand shows no visible sign of what is unfolding below, yet just beneath it, a collective effort continues, guided by instinct and shaped by timing, preparing for a moment that has not yet arrived. The surface finally yields in small, shifting openings, and from beneath, the first hatchlings emerge into open air for the very first time. The transition is immediate and absolute. One moment, there is only the enclosed darkness of sand, and the next, an expanse of space defined by faint light and distant motion. There is no pause to adjust. Movement begins almost at once. They orient themselves not through sight in a complex sense, but through simple contrasts. The horizon over the ocean tends to reflect more light than the land behind them, creating a natural gradient that guides their direction. Even in low illumination, this difference is enough. Each hatchling aligns toward the brighter, lower edge of the landscape and begins to move. The motion is urgent, though not frantic. Their small flippers press against the sand in alternating strokes, pulling their bodies forward in a steady rhythm. The distance is short in absolute terms, yet vast relative to their size and strength. Every grain shifts beneath them, creating resistance that slows their progress. Still, the movement continues without interruption. Around them, the environment is no longer neutral. The shoreline, quiet moments before, now holds a range of silent observers. Birds move overhead, their shapes defined by the dim light, descending with precise timing. Along the ground, crabs emerge from shallow burrows, drawn by movement rather than sound. In some places, small mammals patrol the edges, following instinctive patterns that intersect with this brief emergence. Predation begins almost immediately. A hatchling may vanish in an instant, taken before it has crossed even a small portion of the distance. Others continue, adjusting nothing in their path, driven by the same forward motion that began the moment they reached the surface. There is no defensive behavior in the traditional sense, only persistence. This stage carries one of the highest mortality rates in their entire existence. Only a fraction will reach the water. The rest will be lost along the way, their presence absorbed into the surrounding ecosystem. The process is not chaotic, but continuous, shaped by interactions that have long existed along these shores. In some places, a newer influence alters this movement in subtle but significant ways. Artificial lighting from nearby structures introduces competing sources of brightness. Instead of a single, consistent glow from the ocean horizon, multiple points of light appear across the landscape. These lights can be stronger, closer, and more visually dominant than the natural cue. Hatchlings responding to these artificial sources may turn away from the water, moving inland or along the shore rather than toward the sea. The effect is not immediate confusion in a conscious sense, but a simple misalignment of direction. They follow the brightest visible path, even when it leads away from survival. As time passes, the consequences of this misdirection become more pronounced. Without reaching the water, their energy reserves diminish. Exposure increases, and the likelihood of encountering predators rises. The journey, already brief, becomes extended beyond what their bodies are prepared to sustain. For those that remain aligned with the natural horizon, the ocean grows closer with each movement. The texture of the sand changes slightly near the water's edge, becoming firmer and more compact. The sound of waves, though not clearly perceived in detail, creates subtle vibrations through the ground. The final stretch unfolds quickly. The first contact with water brings a shift in resistance, replacing the friction of sand with the fluid motion of waves. For those that reach this boundary, the most exposed part of their early life comes to an end. Behind them, the beach returns to stillness. The marks left by their passage begin to fade, reshaped by wind and tide. The brief movement across its surface leaves little lasting trace, yet within that short distance, the outcome has already been determined for most. The first contact with the ocean is not a gentle transition, but a shifting boundary that rises and falls with each passing wave. As the hatchlings reach the edge, water moves toward them, then withdraws, leaving behind a thin film that reflects faint light. Timing becomes part of their movement, though not in a conscious sense. They advance with the rhythm of the shoreline, drawn forward as the water returns. When a wave lifts them, their bodies are carried briefly, suspended in motion that replaces the resistance of land. For an instant, there is no friction beneath them, only the force of water moving in a single direction. As the wave recedes, some are pulled back slightly, but the next surge follows, and the process repeats until the boundary of shallow water gives way to deeper movement. Here, a different pattern begins. The hatchlings transition from crawling to swimming, their flippers moving in coordinated strokes that push against the surrounding water. This shift is immediate and continuous. There is no period of adjustment. The motion is already present, embedded within their muscles and neural pathways before the first contact with the sea. This early stage is often described as a swimming frenzy, though it unfolds without visible urgency beyond the steady repetition of movement. For hours, sometimes extending beyond a full day, the hatchlings maintain near constant swimming. Their strokes are consistent and forward directed, carrying them away from the shoreline and into open water. The purpose of this sustained effort lies in distance. Nearshore areas hold a higher concentration of predators, and remaining close to land increases exposure. By moving outward as quickly as their bodies allow, the hatchlings reduce the time spent within this zone. The energy required for this effort is drawn from reserves stored during development, allowing them to sustain movement without feeding. The orientation of this movement is not random. Even in the absence of visible landmarks, the hatchlings maintain a general offshore direction. Studies have shown that wave patterns and the angle of incoming water provide cues that help guide this trajectory. The consistent push of waves from the open ocean toward the shore creates a directional signal, one that can be followed by responding to the motion itself. As they move farther from land, additional mechanisms begin to influence their path. Subtle differences in the Earth's magnetic field provide a form of large-scale orientation, allowing them to maintain a heading that extends beyond immediate wave cues. This sensitivity exists without learning or reinforcement, functioning as an internal system that operates alongside physical movement. The water around them changes gradually. Turbulence near the shore gives way to more stable currents, and the influence of breaking waves diminishes. The hatchlings continue their steady swimming, though the intensity of the initial phase begins to ease as they reach regions where currents can assist their movement. At this stage, individual effort blends with the motion of the ocean itself. Currents carry them along pathways shaped by wind, temperature, and the rotation of the Earth. The hatchlings do not resist these movements. Instead, their swimming aligns with them, conserving energy while maintaining general direction. Predation does not disappear in these waters, but it becomes less concentrated. The vastness of the open ocean disperses both predator and prey, reducing the likelihood of encounter compared to the shoreline. The hatchlings, now smaller figures within a much larger environment, continue their movement with the same steady rhythm. Behind them, the land fades from view, no longer a visible reference point. Ahead, there is no defined destination, only a continuation of open water. The transition from shore to sea completes itself not in a single moment, but through this sustained movement outward, guided by forces that remain consistent even in the absence of any visible path. Beyond the reach of coastal waters, where the influence of land fades into a wide and shifting expanse, the young turtles become difficult to follow. Their small forms move into regions where observation grows limited, and for long periods, they pass through the ocean without leaving clear traces. This phase has come to be known as the lost years, not because the turtles are absent, but because their lives unfold largely beyond direct view. During this time, they do not settle in a fixed location. Instead, they move within large-scale oceanic systems, carried and guided by currents that span entire basins. These currents form slow, circulating pathways, often described as gyres, where water travels in broad loops shaped by wind and the rotation of the earth. Within these moving systems, the turtles drift and swim, becoming part of a dynamic environment that shifts continuously. Among the most significant features of this phase are floating accumulations of seaweed, particularly those formed by sargassum. These mats gather at the surface, creating extended patches that drift along with the currents. They form a kind of floating habitat, structured yet mobile, offering both shelter and resources in an otherwise open setting. For the juvenile turtles, these areas provide a measure of protection. Their coloration blends with the tones of the seaweed, reducing visibility to predators moving below or above. The complexity of the structure creates spaces where they can remain partially concealed, navigating through the tangled fronds with relative ease. This environment does not eliminate risk, but it alters it, making detection less immediate. Within these floating systems, a small but active food web develops. Tiny organisms attach themselves to the seaweed, while small fish and invertebrates move among the strands. The turtles begin to feed during this period, shifting from reliance on stored energy to active foraging. Their diet at this stage is varied, consisting of small crustaceans, larval forms, and other available prey that inhabit the same drifting habitat. Feeding behavior emerges without instruction, guided by instinct and shaped by interaction. The turtles respond to movement and texture, learning through repetition which items can be consumed and which cannot. Their bites are small and frequent, matching the scale of the food available. Over time, this pattern supports gradual growth, though the rate remains slow compared to many other marine species. The term lost years reflects not only the difficulty of observation, but also the extended duration of this stage. It can last for several years, during which the turtles increase in size and strength while remaining within these open ocean environments. Tracking technologies have begun to reveal parts of this journey, yet much remains incomplete, as the vastness of the ocean and the small size of the turtles limit continuous monitoring. As they grow, their interaction with the environment begins to change. Larger individuals may move beyond the confines of sargassum mats, exploring broader areas of the ocean. Their swimming becomes more sustained, less dependent on passive drift, though currents still play a significant role in shaping their movement. Throughout this period, their presence remains subtle, dispersed across wide regions that do not draw attention. They exist within a system that is both structured and fluid, following pathways that do not leave visible marks. The ocean, vast and layered, carries them through this stage without clear boundaries, allowing their development to proceed quietly, largely unseen, within a world that holds far more than can be easily observed. At the surface of the open ocean, far from the influence of coastlines, the water gathers in slow-moving patterns that allow fragments of life to accumulate. Within these converging zones, floating seaweed forms extended rafts that stretch across the surface, rising and falling with the motion of the sea. These drifting structures create a kind of suspended landscape, neither fully part of the water below nor separate from it. Sargassum, a brown macroalgae, dominates these formations. Its branching fronds spread outward in tangled clusters, each strand buoyed by small gas-filled bladders that keep it afloat. Over time, individual pieces merge into larger mats, forming habitats that can persist for long periods as they travel with the currents. These mats do not remain fixed, but they maintain their structure as they move, carrying with them an entire community of organisms. For juvenile turtles, these floating ecosystems serve as early refuges. Their bodies, still small and vulnerable, find relative safety within the complexity of the seaweed. The coloration of their shells and skin blends closely with the tones of the surrounding fronds, creating a form of natural camouflage that reduces contrast against the environment. When viewed from above or below, their outline becomes difficult to distinguish, dissolving into the layered textures of the habitat. The structure of the sargassum provides more than concealment. It creates physical barriers that interrupt direct lines of movement. Predators passing through open water encounter a denser environment here, where visibility is reduced and navigation becomes less straightforward. The turtles move through narrow spaces between the fronds, shifting direction easily, while larger animals may pass by without detecting them. Within this floating world, a network of life develops in close proximity. Small fish weave between the strands, using the shelter in much the same way. Crustaceans cling to the surfaces, their bodies adapted to grasp and remain attached as the mat moves. Tiny invertebrates settle along the edges, feeding on particles carried by the surrounding water. The sargassum itself supports this system, offering both structure and a surface for attachment. The interactions within this environment form a compact food chain. The smallest organisms consume microscopic material, while slightly larger ones feed on them in turn. Juvenile turtles enter this chain as active participants. Their feeding behavior becomes more refined within this setting, as they learn to identify edible prey among the many moving elements. Small crustaceans, larval fish, and gelatinous organisms become part of their diet, each captured through repeated, instinct-driven attempts. Movement within the mat is continuous but unhurried. The turtles navigate through shifting spaces, adjusting their position as the structure around them changes. The entire habitat drifts as a single unit, guided by currents that remain largely unseen from within. This shared motion carries them across vast distances without requiring constant effort, allowing energy to be conserved while still maintaining access to food and shelter. Light filters through the surface layers, creating patterns that shift with each movement of the water. Shadows from the seaweed break up the brightness, adding further complexity to the visual environment. This interplay of light and structure enhances the effectiveness of camouflage, making detection even less likely. As time passes, the turtles grow within this drifting world, gradually increasing in size and strength. Their interactions with the habitat begin to change, though they remain connected to it during this early phase. The Sargassum mats continue their slow journey across the ocean, carrying with them a collection of lives that exist within their layered structure, forming a quiet, moving ecosystem that supports growth in a place that might otherwise seem empty. Nothing follows them into this stage. No presence lingers from the moment of origin. No guiding form remains nearby to demonstrate what should be done. From the beginning, their existence unfolds in complete independence, shaped only by internal patterns and the immediate conditions of the environment around them. Without parental care, every action arises from systems already in place at the moment of hatching. Movement, feeding, orientation, and response to threat do not require instruction. These behaviors are not learned in advance, but they are not entirely fixed either. Instead, they exist as tendencies that are refined through interaction, becoming more effective as experience accumulates. Instinct provides the initial framework. It determines how the flippers move in coordinated strokes, how the head aligns toward certain cues, and how the body reacts to changes in light, motion, or pressure. These responses occur without deliberation, forming the basis for survival in an environment that does not pause to accommodate inexperience. Yet, within this framework, subtle adjustments take place. When a juvenile turtle encounters a drifting object, it may approach or avoid based on movement and texture. Repeated interactions shape these responses, reinforcing patterns that lead to successful feeding or avoidance. Learning, in this sense, does not replace instinct but builds upon it, adding layers of refinement to behaviors that begin as simple reactions. Predator avoidance emerges through this same interplay. In open water, threats can approach from any direction, often without warning. The turtles respond to changes in their surroundings, such as sudden shadows, vibrations, or shifts in water movement. A quick downward dive, a change in direction, or a temporary stillness can reduce visibility and interrupt the path of a pursuing animal. These responses are not uniform. Some individuals react more quickly or in more effective ways, increasing their chances of survival. Others may fail to respond in time. Over many encounters, those that persist are those whose reactions align more closely with the demands of their environment. This process unfolds quietly, without selection in any visible sense, yet it shapes the population over time. The absence of guidance does not result in randomness. Instead, it reveals a system that has been refined across countless generations. Each individual begins with a set of inherited tendencies that have proven effective in similar conditions. As they move through the ocean, these tendencies are tested and adjusted through direct experience. Feeding behavior also reflects this balance. The turtles encounter a variety of potential food sources, some suitable and others not. Initial attempts may be uncertain, but repeated exposure leads to more accurate recognition. Movement patterns shift slightly, becoming more efficient as successful feeding reinforces specific actions. Throughout this stage, the environment itself serves as the only teacher. Currents carry them into new areas, exposing them to different conditions and challenges. Light levels change with depth and time of day, influencing where they move and how they position themselves. Temperature gradients guide their distribution, subtly shaping their range. There is no moment when learning is complete. The process continues, blending instinct and experience into a fluid system that adapts without conscious awareness. Each encounter contributes to a gradual refinement, allowing the turtles to navigate a world that offers no direct instruction. In this quiet progression, survival does not depend on a single skill or behavior, but on the integration of many small responses, each shaped by both inheritance and interaction. The absence of parental care does not leave a void, but instead reveals a different form of continuity, one that exists within the body itself and unfolds through every movement in the water. Time moves differently across the open ocean, not marked by visible change, but by gradual shifts that unfold beyond immediate notice. For young turtles, growth does not announce itself. It proceeds quietly, measured not in sudden transformations, but in small, steady increments that accumulate over years. Their bodies expand slowly, shaped by the balance between energy gained and energy spent. Unlike many marine animals that grow rapidly in their early stages, sea turtles follow a more restrained pattern. Each increase in size reflects a careful allocation of resources where nothing is wasted and little is taken in excess. The pace is deliberate, aligned with an environment where food can be unevenly distributed and conditions change without warning. This slow growth is not a limitation, but a strategy. By extending the period before maturity, they reduce the need for constant, high-volume feeding. Their metabolism remains relatively low compared to more active swimmers, allowing them to sustain themselves on smaller, more irregular meals. Energy is conserved wherever possible, stored when available, and used with precision. Movement reflects this same principle. Rather than continuous, rapid swimming, they alternate between activity and stillness. Periods of motion are followed by moments of rest, where they drift with the surrounding water or remain suspended at a stable depth. This pattern reduces energy expenditure while maintaining their position within favorable conditions. Temperature also plays a role in shaping their development. Warmer waters can accelerate certain processes, while cooler areas slow them further. The turtles move within these gradients, not in direct response to growth, but as part of their broader interaction with the ocean. These shifts influence how quickly their bodies change, adding another layer of variability to an already gradual process. During these years, their form becomes more defined. The shell hardens and thickens, providing increased protection. The flippers strengthen, allowing for more controlled and sustained movement. Internal systems, including respiration and circulation, continue to refine, supporting longer dives and more efficient oxygen use. Despite these changes, maturity remains distant. It can take decades before a sea turtle reaches the stage where reproduction becomes possible. This extended timeline is unusual among many marine species, yet it aligns with their overall strategy of endurance. By investing in slow, steady development, they increase the likelihood of surviving long enough to reproduce. Feeding behavior adapts as they grow. Larger individuals can handle a wider range of prey, expanding their diet beyond the small organisms of earlier stages. This shift does not occur suddenly, but through gradual changes in size, strength, and experience. Each successful feeding event contributes to their continued growth, reinforcing patterns that become more efficient over time. The ocean around them remains vast and largely unchanged in appearance, yet their relationship to it evolves. Areas that once provided shelter may become less central as their size increases. Their movement patterns extend over greater distances, though still guided by the same principles of energy conservation and environmental response. Throughout this period, there is little to distinguish one moment from the next. Growth does not interrupt the flow of their existence, but integrates seamlessly into it. The years pass without clear markers, each one building upon the last in a continuous progression. In this quiet development, there is no urgency. The process unfolds at a pace that matches the rhythms of the ocean itself, steady and unhurried. What emerges over time is not the result of rapid change, but of persistence, where survival is maintained through balance and growth is carried forward without drawing attention to itself. Across the open sea, direction exists without visible markers. There are no fixed paths, no landmarks rising above the surface to define where one place ends and another begins. Yet, movement through this vast space is not random. Beneath the apparent uniformity, the ocean carries patterns that can be followed, forming a kind of map that is sensed rather than seen. For sea turtles, navigation begins early, though it becomes more evident as they grow and extend their range. Their movement across long distances follows routes that align with large-scale features of the planet. These pathways are not constructed in the moment, but are part of a broader system that connects distant regions through consistent environmental cues. Evidence of this navigation has emerged gradually through observation and study. For much of history, the movements of sea turtles remained largely unknown once they left coastal waters. Their disappearance into open ocean created long gaps in understanding, making it difficult to trace where they traveled or how far they went. It was only with the development of tracking technologies that these patterns began to take form. Early tracking studies relied on simple methods, including physical tags attached to individuals before they returned to the sea. When a tagged turtle was later found or recaptured, its location provided a single point of data. Over time, these points began to reveal that individuals could travel across entire ocean basins, covering distances of thousands of kilometers between feeding areas and nesting sites. As technology advanced, satellite tracking allowed for continuous monitoring of movement. Small transmitters attached to the shells of adult turtles sent signals to orbiting satellites, recording their position over extended periods. These data sets revealed not just the endpoints of journeys, but the paths taken between them. The routes were often direct and consistent, suggesting an internal guidance system that maintained orientation across open water. The precision of these movements became increasingly clear. Turtles were observed leaving feeding grounds and traveling toward distant nesting beaches with minimal deviation, even when crossing areas with no obvious reference points. Their paths did not wander aimlessly, but followed trajectories that remained stable over long distances. This ability to navigate is closely tied to environmental features that are not immediately visible. Variations in the Earth's magnetic field provide a framework that extends across the entire planet. These variations create gradients that can be detected and interpreted, allowing the turtles to determine both direction and position relative to larger geographic structures. In addition to magnetic cues, ocean currents play a role in shaping movement. While currents can carry individuals passively, they also form consistent patterns that can be integrated into navigation. By aligning their swimming with these flows, turtles can conserve energy while maintaining a general course toward their destination. The concept of the ocean as a map emerges from this combination of factors. It is not a map in the visual sense, but a network of signals that provide orientation without requiring sight. The turtles move through this network continuously, adjusting their direction in response to changes that are subtle but consistent. Their journeys extend far beyond what might be expected from an animal moving through such an expansive environment. The distances involved, the consistency of the routes, and the accuracy of their arrival all point to a system that operates reliably over time. Within this system, the ocean is not an empty space, but a structured environment filled with information. The turtles navigate through it with a steady, unbroken movement, guided by cues that remain present even when no visible path can be seen. Invisible lines extend across the planet, flowing from pole to pole in patterns that remain constant even as the surface shifts. These lines form the Earth's magnetic field, a global structure that surrounds the planet and penetrates its oceans. It cannot be seen or heard, yet it exists everywhere, providing a subtle framework that many species can detect and use. For sea turtles, this field becomes part of their internal orientation system. Within their bodies, specialized mechanisms respond to variations in magnetic intensity and inclination, allowing them to perceive differences across geographic regions. These differences are not large in a human sense, but they are consistent, creating a set of coordinates that can be interpreted through biological processes. The magnetic field varies in both strength and angle depending on location. Near the equator, the field lines run more parallel to the surface, while closer to the poles, they dip more steeply. At the same time, the overall intensity changes gradually across the globe. Together, these two properties create a kind of grid where each area holds a unique combination of values. Sea turtles appear able to detect these variations and use them as reference points. As they move through the ocean, they experience subtle shifts in magnetic conditions. These shifts provide information about their position relative to larger geographic features, allowing them to maintain a general direction even when no other cues are available. This ability has been explored through controlled experiments. In laboratory settings, researchers have exposed hatchlings and juveniles to magnetic fields that simulate conditions from different parts of the ocean. By adjusting the intensity and inclination within these artificial fields, it is possible to recreate the magnetic signature of distant locations. When placed within these simulated environments, the turtles often adjust their orientation in ways that correspond to the location being represented. For example, a hatchling exposed to a magnetic field characteristic of a northern region may orient itself differently than one exposed to a southern field. These responses occur without prior experience of those locations, suggesting that the ability to interpret magnetic information is present from an early stage. Further studies have shown that this sense is not limited to initial orientation. Adult turtles, tracked over long distances, maintain consistent headings that align with magnetic gradients across entire ocean basins. Even when displaced from their usual routes, they can adjust their movement to return to a general path, indicating a capacity to integrate magnetic information over time. The underlying biological mechanism is still being investigated. Some evidence points to magnetite particles within tissues, which may respond physically to magnetic fields. Other research suggests the involvement of chemical reactions influenced by magnetic conditions, possibly linked to visual or neural processes. While the exact system remains unclear, the functional outcome is evident in the consistency of their navigation. This magnetic sense does not operate in isolation. It works alongside other environmental cues, including wave direction and current patterns, forming a layered system of orientation. Each component contributes to a broader ability to move through open water with stability and purpose. Within this framework, the ocean becomes more than an undifferentiated expanse. It is structured by forces that extend beyond immediate perception, offering information that can be used to maintain direction over vast distances. The turtles move through this invisible structure continuously, guided by signals that remain present regardless of visibility or weather. In this way, navigation is not dependent on a single sense, but on the integration of multiple inputs, with the magnetic field providing a constant reference that spans the entire planet. Far from land, The surface of the ocean appears uniform, yet beneath that appearance, vast streams of water move in steady, organized flows. These currents travel across entire basins, shaped by wind patterns, temperature differences, and the rotation of the Earth. They do not form visible roads, yet they create pathways that connect distant regions with quiet consistency. Sea turtles move within these pathways as part of a larger system that carries heat, nutrients, and life across the globe. The currents act as slow-moving conveyors, guiding anything that drifts within them. For a turtle, entering one of these flows changes the nature of movement. Instead of relying entirely on continuous swimming, the surrounding water begins to contribute to forward progress. These oceanic highways vary in strength and direction. Some form broad loops that circulate water over long distances, while others move in more linear paths along coastlines or across open sea. The turtles encounter these flows gradually, adjusting their movement as the current begins to influence their position. There is no abrupt shift, only a subtle alignment between their own motion and the direction of the water. Energy efficiency becomes central in this interaction. Swimming continuously against the force of a current would require a significant expenditure of energy, especially over long distances. Instead, turtles orient themselves to take advantage of the flow, allowing it to carry them while they maintain a general heading. Their strokes become less about propulsion alone and more about steering within the moving water. This balance between passive and active movement defines much of their travel. At times, they drift with minimal effort, their bodies held in the current as it moves beneath them. During these periods, energy use is reduced, allowing reserves to be conserved for moments when active swimming is necessary. When adjustments are needed, they increase their effort, using their flippers to change direction or maintain depth. The distinction between drifting and swimming is not fixed. It shifts continuously, depending on the strength of the current and the desired direction of travel. In weaker flows, more active movement is required to maintain progress. In stronger currents, even small adjustments can result in significant changes in position. The turtles navigate this balance without conscious calculation, guided by sensory input and internal systems that respond to movement and orientation. Currents also influence the distribution of food and habitat. Areas where flows converge often accumulate floating material and small organisms, creating regions of higher biological activity. Turtles moving within these zones encounter more frequent feeding opportunities, reinforcing their presence within certain pathways. In this way, the currents not only guide movement, but also shape where resources are found. As turtles grow and their movements extend across larger distances, their interaction with these oceanic highways becomes more refined. They are able to maintain direction even as currents shift, integrating their own swimming with the motion of the water. This allows them to travel efficiently over long periods, covering distances that would be difficult to sustain through active movement alone. The ocean, though vast and seemingly unstructured, contains within it these consistent flows that provide both direction and support. The turtles move through them with a steady rhythm, their bodies adapting to the changing forces around them. What appears as open, undifferentiated water becomes a network of invisible paths where movement is guided not by fixed markers, but by the continuous motion of the sea itself. Across the open sea, food is not evenly distributed. It appears in shifting patches, carried by currents, rising from deeper layers, or anchored to specific habitats. For sea turtles, feeding becomes a process of adaptation, shaped by both species and environment, each developing patterns that match the resources available to them. Different species follow distinct dietary paths. Some move through waters where gelatinous organisms drift in large numbers, their soft bodies suspended in the current. Others settle in shallower regions where plant life grows across the seafloor, forming dense meadows. Still others search along reefs and open water for small animals that move within reach. These variations are not random, but reflect differences in anatomy, behavior, and habitat preference. Turtles that consume jellyfish have bodies suited to capturing soft, floating prey. Their beaks are shaped to grasp and tear without requiring force suited for harder materials. As they swim, they encounter these drifting organisms and feed directly from the water column. This diet connects them to a part of the ocean that is often transient, where food appears and disappears with changing conditions. Other species focus on seagrass, grazing along underwater fields that grow in sunlit coastal waters. These meadows provide a stable and renewable source of nourishment. The turtles move slowly over the bottom, cropping the vegetation in a way that encourages new growth. Their feeding shapes the structure of these habitats, preventing overgrowth and maintaining a balance that supports other forms of life. Crustaceans and other small invertebrates form another important part of the diet for certain species. These animals are often found among reefs, rocky areas, or within the sediment itself. Turtles feeding in these environments use stronger beaks to crush shells and extract the soft tissue inside. This type of feeding requires more effort and precision, reflecting a different set of adaptations. The role of sea turtles within these systems extends beyond their own survival. By feeding on jellyfish, they help regulate populations that might otherwise expand rapidly, influencing the balance of plankton and other small organisms. In seagrass meadows, their grazing maintains healthy growth patterns, supporting fish and invertebrates that depend on these habitats. When consuming crustaceans, they contribute to the turnover of materials within reef systems, participating in cycles that redistribute nutrients. Feeding behavior also shifts as individuals grow. Younger turtles often consume smaller, more easily captured prey, gradually expanding their diet as their size and strength increase. This transition allows them to occupy different ecological roles over time, moving between feeding strategies as their bodies change. The act of feeding itself is continuous but measured. Turtles do not feed constantly, but in intervals that align with the availability of food and their own energy needs. They move through areas where resources are more abundant, remaining there for periods before continuing on. This pattern reduces unnecessary energy use while ensuring that intake remains sufficient for growth and maintenance. The vastness of the ocean does not prevent these interactions from forming a connected system. Each feeding event, though small in isolation, contributes to a larger network of relationships between species and environments. The turtles, moving quietly through this network, influence it through their presence and behavior. Within this expansive setting, feeding becomes more than a simple act of consumption. It is part of a continuous exchange where energy passes from one form to another and where each movement contributes to the ongoing balance of life beneath the surface. Form emerges not as decoration, but as consequence. Over long spans of time, bodies settle into shapes that meet the demands of movement, pressure, and distance. In sea turtles, this shaping is evident in every curve and surface, each element refined for a life carried through water rather than across land. The shell, often seen as a rigid structure, holds within it a balance between strength and fluidity. Its dome is not perfectly round, nor sharply angled, but gently contoured in a way that allows water to pass over it with minimal disruption. the surface reduces drag, smoothing the flow as the turtle moves forward. Beneath this outer form, the shell remains strong enough to protect vital organs, yet it avoids unnecessary thickness that would increase weight. This streamlining extends beyond the shell itself. The head and neck retract into the body in a way that preserves a continuous profile, reducing resistance when the turtle swims. Even the edges of the shell are shaped to guide water along predictable paths, limiting turbulence that would otherwise slow movement. Every part contributes to a form that interacts efficiently with the surrounding medium. The flippers provide the primary force of propulsion. Unlike the limbs of terrestrial animals, they are flattened and elongated, functioning more like wings than legs. Their motion through the water generates lift as well as thrust, allowing the turtle to glide between strokes. This combination reduces the need for constant effort, as forward movement continues even during brief pauses. The front flippers are particularly powerful, driving the turtle forward with wide, sweeping motions. Each stroke engages large muscle groups, producing sustained propulsion over long distances. The rear flippers, smaller and more subtle in their movement, assist with steering and stabilization, adjusting orientation without interrupting forward progress. This design supports long-distance travel, where efficiency becomes essential. Swimming continuously at high intensity would quickly deplete energy reserves, especially in an environment where food may not always be immediately available. Instead, the turtles rely on a pattern of movement that balances effort and glide, using each stroke to extend forward motion as far as possible. Energy efficiency is further supported by internal adaptations. The distribution of mass within the body allows for stable buoyancy, reducing the effort needed to maintain depth. By adjusting the volume of air in their lungs, turtles can fine-tune their position in the water column, rising or sinking with minimal movement. This control reduces unnecessary exertion, conserving energy over time. The relationship between form and function becomes most apparent during sustained travel. As the turtle moves through open water, its body aligns with the direction of motion, minimizing lateral resistance. The flippers operate in a rhythm that maintains forward momentum while allowing brief periods of reduced activity. Each element works in coordination, forming a system that supports endurance rather than speed alone. Even at rest, this efficiency remains evident. The turtle can drift with currents, its streamlined shape allowing water to flow past without creating significant drag. When movement resumes, the transition is smooth, requiring only a gradual increase in effort to regain speed. Over time, this combination of structural design and movement pattern enables journeys that span vast distances. The body does not fight the water, but moves with it, using its properties to extend reach while conserving strength. In this quiet alignment between form and environment, survival is not achieved through force, but through balance. The shape of the turtle becomes a reflection of the medium it inhabits, each curve and motion contributing to a way of life that depends on moving far, steadily, and without excess. Air exists only above the surface, yet sea turtles spend the majority of their lives beneath it. Their bodies carry a system designed for this dual existence, where breathing depends on access to the atmosphere, but survival unfolds largely within water. This balance shapes how they move, rest, and endure in an environment that does not provide oxygen directly. Inside the body, the lungs extend along the upper region beneath the shell, occupying a space that also influences buoyancy. These lungs are highly efficient, capable of exchanging gases quickly when the turtle surfaces. A single breath can replenish oxygen levels and prepare the body for extended periods below. The process is controlled and measured, with each inhalation and exhalation adjusting both respiration and position in the water. Unlike animals that rely on gills, sea turtles must return to the surface to breathe. This necessity introduces a rhythm to their existence, where time underwater is balanced by brief moments above. The duration of each dive varies depending on activity, temperature, and the state of the animal. When actively swimming or feeding, dives may be shorter as oxygen is used more rapidly. During periods of rest, the body's demand decreases, allowing for longer submergence. Diving behavior reflects this variation. A turtle descending through the water column adjusts its buoyancy by controlling the volume of air in its lungs. By releasing some of this air, it can sink with minimal effort, gliding downward rather than actively swimming. Once at a chosen depth, it maintains position through subtle movements, conserving energy while remaining stable. Oxygen is stored not only in the lungs, but also within the blood and muscle tissues. Hemoglobin in the blood binds oxygen efficiently, while myoglobin in the muscles allows for additional storage. These adaptations extend the time a turtle can remain submerged, supporting activities that require extended dives. As oxygen is gradually used, carbon dioxide levels rise, eventually signaling the need to return to the surface. During rest, this system becomes even more effective. A turtle may settle on the seafloor or remain suspended in the water, its movements reduced to almost nothing. The heart rate slows, decreasing the rate at which oxygen is consumed. In this state, dives can last for several hours, far longer than during active periods. The body enters a quiet conservation mode, where energy use is minimized and time stretches without urgency. The return to the surface is unhurried. As oxygen levels approach a lower threshold, the turtle begins a gradual ascent. The movement is smooth, guided by buoyancy and gentle strokes of the flippers. Upon reaching the surface, it takes a breath, sometimes only a single inhalation, before descending again. This cycle repeats throughout its life, forming a continuous pattern of submergence and renewal. Environmental conditions influence this rhythm. In colder waters, metabolic rates decrease, allowing for longer dives. In warmer regions, increased activity may shorten the time spent below. The turtle adjusts naturally to these variations, its physiology responding to changes without disrupting the overall balance. Breathing, though dependent on air, becomes integrated into a life lived mostly without it. The moments at the surface are brief and functional, while the majority of existence continues below, supported by systems that extend the use of each breath. In this way, the boundary between air and water is crossed repeatedly, each transition part of a steady cycle that allows survival in a world where oxygen is always just beyond reach, yet consistently available when needed. In deeper waters, where light fades into muted gradients, encounters unfold without warning. Movement here is often subtle, carried through pressure changes and shifting silhouettes rather than clear outlines. Within this space, sea turtles continue their steady passage, yet they do not move alone. Larger forms share these depths, their presence part of a long-standing balance between hunter and prey. Sharks move through these regions with quiet efficiency, their bodies designed for detection and pursuit. Sensitive to electrical signals and vibrations, they can locate movement even when visibility is low. Large predatory fish, too, navigate these layers, responding to patterns of motion that indicate potential prey. For a turtle, these encounters are not constant, but they are always possible. The turtle's response does not rely on speed alone. While capable of sustained swimming, it cannot match the rapid acceleration of many predators. Instead, its survival depends on a combination of awareness, positioning, and physical protection. The shell, already shaped for movement, also serves as a barrier. Its structure resists penetration, providing defense against many forms of attack. When a predator approaches, subtle changes in behavior may occur. A turtle may alter its depth, descending or rising to disrupt the trajectory of the approaching animal. This vertical movement introduces complexity into the encounter, making pursuit less direct. At times, a sudden change in direction can create enough distance to reduce immediate risk. Stillness can also function as a form of defense. By reducing movement, the turtle minimizes the signals that attract attention. In an environment where detection often depends on motion, remaining quiet can delay or prevent an encounter. This response does not guarantee safety, but it shifts the conditions under which a predator must operate. In some cases, the shell becomes the primary means of survival. If contact occurs, the turtle may withdraw its head and flippers, presenting a more uniform surface that is difficult to grasp. The curved shape deflects force, and the lack of exposed limbs reduces points of vulnerability. Many predators, encountering this resistance, may abandon the attempt in favor of more accessible prey. Size also influences these interactions. As turtles grow, their vulnerability decreases. Larger individuals are less likely to be targeted, not because they are immune, but because the effort required to subdue them increases. This gradual shift alters the balance of risk over time, with younger turtles facing more frequent threats. Adaptations extend beyond physical form. The ability to remain underwater for extended periods allows turtles to avoid surface-based predators. By controlling their ascent and descent, they can navigate layers of the ocean where different threats are present, adjusting their position to reduce exposure. These encounters, though significant, do not dominate every moment. The ocean remains vast, and interactions between predator and prey occur within a broader context of movement and space. Many passages unfold without interruption, the turtle continuing its steady path through changing depths. Over time, survival reflects the integration of these responses. There is no single strategy that ensures safety, but a combination of behaviors and structures that together reduce risk. Each encounter contributes to a quiet selection, where those that persist carry forward the traits that support endurance. In this environment, survival is not defined by confrontation, but by the ability to navigate presence and absence, movement and stillness, strength and restraint. The turtle moves through these depths with a calm continuity, shaped by conditions that have remained consistent across generations, where each passage carries both possibility and risk within the same silent water. Across the wide expanse of the ocean, presence is often defined by absence. Distances stretch without interruption, and movement unfolds without the constant proximity of others. For sea turtles, this becomes the prevailing condition of life, a quiet existence shaped not by groups or shared routines, but by individual passage through a vast and shifting environment. They do not travel in coordinated formations, nor do they gather in stable social units. Each turtle moves according to its own rhythm, guided by internal cues and environmental conditions rather than the behavior of others. Their paths may cross, sometimes briefly, yet these moments do not form lasting connections. The ocean offers space without boundaries, and within that space, separation becomes the natural state. Encounters occur, though they are infrequent and often without interaction. Two individuals may pass within the same region, their movements intersecting for a short time before diverging again. There is no exchange beyond proximity, no visible communication that extends beyond the immediate presence. Each continues along its course, unaffected by the brief alignment. This solitary pattern begins early and persists throughout life. From the moment they leave the shore, they move independently, without following or being followed. Their behavior does not rely on learning from others, nor does it depend on coordinated action. Instead, it is shaped by instinct and experience, refined through direct interaction with the environment rather than through social influence. The absence of social groups does not indicate a lack of complexity. Navigation, feeding, and survival all require responses that are precise and adaptable. These processes unfold internally, without the need for shared knowledge or collective decision-making. Each turtle carries within it the mechanisms required to move through changing conditions, adjusting its behavior as needed without reference to others. In certain phases of life, interactions become slightly more frequent, particularly in areas where resources are concentrated. Feeding grounds may attract multiple individuals, drawn by the same environmental conditions. Even in these settings, the turtles remain largely independent, occupying the same space without forming structured groups. Their movements overlap, but do not synchronize. Reproductive periods introduce another form of encounter, where individuals come together for a specific purpose. These interactions are limited in duration and do not extend beyond the immediate context. Once completed, the turtles return to their solitary patterns, dispersing back into the wider ocean without maintaining contact. The advantages of this solitary existence align with the nature of their environment. Resources in the ocean can be unevenly distributed, and independence allows each individual to respond directly to local conditions without competition within a group. Movement remains flexible, unconstrained by the needs or behavior of others. At the same time, this isolation means that each turtle faces challenges alone. There is no shared vigilance against predators, no cooperative feeding, and no collective navigation. Survival depends entirely on individual capacity, shaped by inherited traits and personal experience. Despite this, their presence within the ocean contributes to a broader system that connects many forms of life. Even without direct interaction, their feeding, movement, and growth influence the environments they pass through, linking them indirectly to other species and processes. In this quiet solitude, life unfolds without the constant presence of others, yet remains part of a larger continuity. Each turtle moves through the ocean as a single, self-contained existence, guided by internal systems and external conditions, carrying forward a pattern that does not rely on companionship, but persists through time within the open and unbounded sea. Years pass without clear markers in the open ocean, where change unfolds gradually and often without visible sign. For sea turtles, time does not gather in noticeable stages. It extends quietly, carried forward through steady movement and subtle shifts within the body, shaping a lifespan that reaches far beyond what might be expected from such early vulnerability. Estimates of their lifespan suggest that many individuals can live for several decades, with some reaching 50 years or more. In certain cases, lifespans may extend even further, though exact limits remain difficult to determine. Their lives are not easily observed from beginning to end, and much of what is known comes from long-term studies that follow individuals across years or rely on indirect measures of age. Aging in sea turtles occurs at a measured pace. Unlike species that grow rapidly and mature quickly, they follow a slower trajectory, where development and aging are closely linked. The same processes that guide their gradual growth also influence how their bodies change over time. There is no sudden shift into decline, but a continuation of patterns that have been present since early life. This slow aging is supported by physiological stability. Their metabolism remains relatively low, reducing the accumulation of cellular damage that can accompany higher metabolic rates. Energy is used carefully, and many functions operate with a level of efficiency that limits unnecessary strain. These factors contribute to a lifespan that extends across decades without dramatic interruption. Throughout these years, their presence in the ocean remains largely unnoticed. They move across wide regions, often alone, without forming visible groups or leaving consistent traces. Even as they grow and mature, their movements do not draw attention. They pass through environments that change around them, yet their own patterns remain steady. The ocean itself provides a setting that allows for this quiet persistence. Its scale disperses individuals across vast distances, reducing the likelihood of frequent observation. Conditions shift with currents, temperature, and depth, but these changes occur within ranges that the turtles can navigate without disruption. Their lives unfold within this dynamic system, shaped by it yet not confined to any single place. As years accumulate, the body continues to function with consistency. The shell, once formed, remains a durable structure, showing gradual wear rather than rapid change. The flippers maintain their strength, supporting movement across long distances. Internal systems, including respiration and circulation, continue to operate efficiently, sustaining the rhythm of diving and surfacing that defines their existence. Reproductive maturity arrives only after many years, marking a transition that reflects time rather than sudden transformation. Even then, the overall pattern of life does not shift dramatically. Movement, feeding, and navigation continue as before, integrated into a longer cycle that includes return and renewal. The passage of decades does not alter the essential nature of their existence. Each year blends into the next, forming a continuous sequence without clear boundaries. Growth slows, but does not cease entirely. Activity remains steady, guided by the same internal systems that have functioned from the beginning. Within this extended timeline, their lives remain quiet, unfolding beneath the surface in a way that rarely intersects with human observation. They persist within the vastness of the ocean, their presence woven into a system that operates on scales of both space and time that are difficult to perceive directly. In this way, decades pass not as a series of distinct events, but as a gradual continuation where aging is subtle and life extends forward with a calm consistency that reflects the enduring rhythms of the sea. Somewhere, within the steady passage of years, a shift takes hold that is not visible from the outside. The body, having grown and stabilized through long development, begins to follow a different rhythm, one that has been building quietly beneath all previous movement. It does not arrive suddenly, but emerges as a gradual alignment between physiology and timing, guiding the next stage of life. Maturity brings with it a change in internal processes. Hormonal cycles begin to regulate behavior in ways that had not been present before, linking the body to a broader pattern that extends beyond immediate surroundings. These cycles are not influenced by learning or observation, but arise from mechanisms that have remained consistent across generations. The result is a transition from dispersed movement toward a more directed form of travel. The timing of this shift is precise, though it varies among individuals and species. It is influenced by factors such as age, size, and environmental conditions, yet it follows an internal schedule that does not require external instruction. As these conditions align, the turtle begins to move with a different sense of orientation, one that carries it across distances it has not traversed in many years. This movement marks the beginning of migration, a return that connects present existence with an earlier point in life. The journey does not retrace every step taken before, but it follows a path shaped by large-scale cues that remain stable over time. The same systems that guided earlier movement across open water now take on a more focused role, directing travel toward a specific region. Internal biological timing plays a central role in sustaining this journey. The body prepares in advance, storing energy and adjusting metabolism to support extended travel. Feeding patterns may shift to increase energy reserves, while activity becomes more consistent in direction. The turtle moves with a steady persistence, maintaining a course that does not depend on immediate surroundings. As the journey progresses, the ocean once again becomes a network of pathways. Currents assist in movement, reducing the effort required to cover long distances. Magnetic cues continue to provide orientation, allowing the turtle to maintain direction even when conditions change. These systems operate together, forming a guidance structure that supports travel across vast areas without visible markers. The return is not a direct recollection of past experience in the way memory is often understood. Instead, it reflects a form of inherited guidance, where the destination is encoded within the organism itself. The turtle does not search in a random sense, but moves with a consistent heading that gradually brings it closer to a particular region. Throughout this process, the ocean remains largely unchanged in appearance. The surface extends in all directions, and the depths hold no visible signs of the destination ahead. Yet the turtle continues, its movement shaped by cues that are not immediately apparent, but remain reliable across time. The journey may take weeks or months, depending on distance and conditions. It unfolds without interruption, each movement contributing to a gradual approach. There is no sudden arrival, only a steady progression that narrows the distance between origin and return. In this phase, life transitions from quiet persistence to purposeful movement. The years spent growing and adapting now converge into a single direction, guided by internal systems that have remained dormant until this moment. The call to return does not alter the nature of the turtle's existence, but it redirects it, linking past and present through a journey that continues across the open sea. Lines of travel begin to emerge, only when viewed from far above, traced across maps that gather months and years into a single image. What appears as empty ocean becomes marked by long arcs that stretch between distant regions, revealing journeys that cross entire basins with quiet consistency. These routes are not carved into the water, yet they recur with a steadiness that suggests structure beneath the surface. Sea turtles follow these expansive paths during migration, moving between feeding grounds and nesting areas that may lie thousands of kilometers apart. The distances involved extend far beyond what can be observed from a single vantage point. A turtle may leave one region and travel across open water for weeks or months, maintaining a direction that carries it toward a destination it cannot see. The discovery of these routes has depended on advances in tracking technology. Satellite transmitters, carefully attached to the shells of adult turtles, have allowed researchers to record positions over extended periods. Each signal provides a point in space, and as these points accumulate, a continuous path begins to form. These paths reveal movement that is both extensive and remarkably direct. Rather than wandering across the ocean, turtles often travel along corridors that align with large-scale features of the marine environment. Some routes follow the edges of currents, where water flows in consistent directions. Others cross open areas with minimal deviation, suggesting that internal guidance systems maintain orientation even when external cues are limited. The precision of this travel becomes evident when comparing multiple individuals from the same population. Turtles leaving similar regions tend to follow comparable routes, even when separated by time. This consistency indicates that the pathways are not created through chance, but reflect underlying patterns that are recognized and followed across generations. Satellite data has also shown that turtles can adjust their movement in response to changing conditions without losing their overall direction. If currents shift or obstacles arise, their paths may curve slightly, yet they continue toward the same general endpoint. This flexibility allows them to navigate a dynamic environment while maintaining long-distance accuracy. The scale of these migrations places them among the most extensive movements observed in marine animals. Some individuals travel across entire ocean basins, connecting regions separated by vast distances. These journeys unfold without visible landmarks, relying instead on a combination of internal orientation and environmental cues that remain consistent across large areas. During migration, movement becomes more sustained and directed than in other phases of life. Feeding may still occur, but it does not interrupt the overall trajectory. The turtle continues forward with a steady rhythm, integrating swimming effort with the influence of currents to maintain progress over time. The ocean, when viewed at this scale, reveals a hidden organization. Currents form broad patterns, magnetic fields provide consistent gradients, and temperature differences create boundaries that can be followed. Together, these elements form a network that supports long-distance travel, even in the absence of visible guides. Each migration adds to a growing body of knowledge about how these animals move through the world. The data collected from satellite tracking does not only show where they go, but also how they navigate, how they respond to environmental changes, and how consistent their movements remain over time. In this quiet crossing of entire oceans, the journey itself becomes a reflection of systems that extend beyond immediate perception. The turtles move through a space that appears uniform, yet holds within it the structure needed to guide them across distances that span the width of the sea, linking distant places through paths that remain unseen, yet consistently followed. Long after the first journey away from shore, a distant location begins to take on a quiet significance. It is not held as a clear image or a remembered scene, but as a direction that gradually becomes more defined as the turtle approaches a particular region. The destination has not been revisited since the earliest stage of life, yet the movement toward it unfolds with a steady and consistent alignment. This behavior is known as natal homing, the return to the place of origin after many years spent elsewhere. For sea turtles, this return can occur across vast distances, bringing them back to the same coastline and often to a very specific stretch of beach. The precision of this movement has been observed repeatedly, with individuals arriving within a narrow range of the site where they first entered the ocean. The process does not rely on continuous familiarity with the location. Instead, it appears to be guided by information acquired during the earliest moments of life and reinforced through internal systems that remain active over time. As hatchlings, turtles experience the magnetic and environmental conditions of their birthplace, forming a kind of imprint that can later be used for orientation. As adults, when the time for return arrives, they begin to interpret the same types of cues encountered during their initial departure. The Earth's magnetic field, with its unique combination of intensity and inclination at each location, provides a broad framework. By detecting these variations, turtles can narrow their position within a large geographic area, moving toward the region that matches the conditions they carry within their internal system. This initial guidance brings them closer to their destination, but it does not fully account for the level of precision observed. As they approach coastal waters, additional cues begin to play a role. Chemical signals in the water, carried by currents from specific shorelines, may provide localized information that refines their direction. Subtle differences in temperature, salinity, and wave patterns could also contribute to this final stage of navigation. Scientific theories continue to explore how these multiple cues are integrated. Some suggest that magnetic imprinting during early life provides a long-term reference, while others propose that turtles combine magnetic information with sensory input gathered during the return journey. Experimental studies have shown that altering magnetic conditions can influence orientation, supporting the idea that this sense remains central to navigation. The accuracy of natal homing is not absolute in every case, but it is consistent enough to demonstrate a reliable system. Turtles may return to a general region rather than an exact point, yet many come remarkably close to their original site. This level of precision, maintained over decades and across long distances, reflects a form of guidance that operates continuously, even when not actively used. The return itself unfolds without visible recognition. There is no pause that marks arrival, no outward sign that the destination has been reached. Instead, movement continues until the environmental conditions align with the internal reference and the turtle transitions naturally into the next phase of its life cycle. In this way, the concept of memory takes on a different form. It is not a recollection of images or events, but a retained alignment between the organism and a specific set of environmental conditions. This alignment persists through time, guiding movement across the ocean until it leads back to a place that has not been seen since the beginning, yet remains present within the systems that direct the journey. As the distance narrows, the character of the water begins to change in ways that are subtle yet consistent. Broad ocean patterns give way to more complex movements shaped by the presence of land. Currents bend, slow, and redirect, carrying traces of nearby coastlines outward into the surrounding sea. Within these shifting conditions, the turtle's movement becomes more finely tuned, adjusting in response to cues that grow increasingly specific. Coastal navigation unfolds through a combination of sensory inputs that refine the broader guidance used across open water. The magnetic field continues to provide a general framework, but its role becomes more localized, helping to align position within a narrower region. At the same time, other signals begin to take precedence, offering information that can only be detected at closer range. Chemical cues carried by the water form one of these signals. Substances released from land, including those associated with vegetation and sediment, disperse into the surrounding ocean. These compounds create gradients that vary in concentration, forming patterns that can be followed as they strengthen toward their source. The turtle moves through these gradients, adjusting direction as the concentration changes, gradually orienting toward the coastline. Wave patterns also contribute to this process. As water interacts with the contours of the shore, it reflects and refracts in ways that differ from the uniform motion of open sea. The direction and frequency of waves can provide information about the orientation of land, allowing the turtle to align its movement with the incoming flow. This interaction between body and water creates a continuous feedback, guiding motion without the need for visual confirmation. Temperature and salinity variations add further detail to the environment. Coastal waters often differ from offshore regions in measurable ways, influenced by freshwater input, depth, and local climate. These differences form gradients that can be detected and used to refine position. As the turtle moves through these changing conditions, its path becomes increasingly precise. Visual cues may also begin to play a role, though often only in the final stages. The contrast between land and water, even in low light, can provide orientation once the shoreline is within range. The outline of the coast, the pattern of breaking waves, and the texture of the surface all contribute to a clearer sense of direction. Finding the exact beach requires the integration of all these cues. The process does not rely on a single signal, but on the convergence of multiple sources of information that together define a specific location. The turtle moves along the coastline, adjusting its position in small increments, guided by variations that distinguish one stretch of shore from another. This precision is not absolute in every case, yet it is often remarkably accurate. Individuals may arrive within a short distance of their original site, narrowing their search to a limited area that reflects the conditions they carry within their internal system. The final approach becomes a process of alignment, where movement continues until the combination of cues matches what is encoded within them. The transition from open ocean to coastal waters does not occur abruptly, but through a gradual increase in detail. Each layer of information builds upon the last, guiding the turtle closer to a specific point along the shore. The journey, which began across vast and undifferentiated space, now resolves into a focused path shaped by the subtle complexity of the coastal environment. In this final stage, the ocean reveals its capacity to guide not only across distance, but toward precision, allowing a return that depends on the quiet interplay of forces that remain present even when unseen. The boundary between water and land comes into focus again, not as a distant memory, but as an immediate presence. Waves rise and fall in familiar rhythms, and beneath them, the seafloor lifts toward a surface that does not move. The turtle pauses just beyond this threshold, suspended in the shallows, as if aligning once more with a place that exists both externally and within its internal system. When the moment arrives, it moves forward, leaving the support of water behind. The transition is deliberate. Buoyancy gives way to weight, and each movement across the sand requires effort that has not been used in years. The flippers, shaped for propulsion through water, now press against a surface that resists rather than yields. Progress is slow, marked by the steady repetition of motion. The ascent continues beyond the reach of the tide, where the surface remains stable and dry. There is no hesitation in direction, only a gradual movement toward a location that satisfies conditions carried within the body. The path may curve slightly, adjusting to subtle differences in slope and texture, but it maintains a consistent progression inland. This return to land is not an isolated event, but part of a repeating cycle. Having reached maturity and completed the long journey across the ocean, the turtle now enters the reproductive phase that has defined its species for generations. The actions that follow are guided by patterns that have remained unchanged, linking present behavior to a continuity that extends far beyond individual experience. The physical demands of this process are considerable. Moving across land requires sustained effort, as the body is not adapted for prolonged activity outside water. Each movement presses weight into the sand, leaving a trail that marks the passage from sea to nesting site. The energy required for this ascent is drawn from reserves accumulated during earlier feeding, supporting the process without interruption. Vulnerability increases during this time. On land, the turtle cannot rely on the same mobility it possesses in water. Its movements are slower, and its ability to evade threats is reduced. The environment, though familiar in a distant sense, presents risks that are absent beneath the surface. Yet the process continues without deviation, guided by the same internal systems that directed the journey across the ocean. Once the appropriate location is reached, the nesting sequence begins, repeating the actions that have been carried out by countless individuals before. The sand is shaped, the chamber formed, and the eggs deposited in a process that unfolds with quiet precision. Each step follows the same pattern, ensuring that the conditions required for development are met. After the nesting is complete, the turtle covers the site and begins the return to the water. There is no extended pause, no lingering presence. The cycle, once initiated, moves forward with continuity, linking the act of return with the act of departure. The descent back toward the sea mirrors the earlier ascent, though the direction is reversed. The body moves steadily, drawn once again toward the water where buoyancy will restore ease of movement. As the waves reach the turtle, they begin to lift its weight, gradually returning it to the environment where it can move with fluidity. In this repeated passage between ocean and land, the cycle renews itself. The return does not mark an end, but a continuation, where each journey contributes to a process that has persisted across time, carried forward through actions that remain consistent despite the changing world around them. Patterns persist even when no individual carries them consciously. Across long stretches of time, actions repeat with a consistency that does not depend on instruction or shared experience. In sea turtles, this continuity appears not as learned behavior, but as a sequence embedded within the species itself, unfolding generation after generation without visible transmission. Each new life begins without guidance from those that came before. There is no exchange of knowledge between parent and offspring, no demonstration of movement, feeding, or navigation. The connection between generations exists in a different form, carried within biological structures that encode tendencies rather than memories. What emerges in each individual is not a recollection, but a readiness to follow patterns that have proven effective over time. This process allows the cycle to continue without interruption. Hatchlings, moving independently from the moment they reach the water, begin to express behaviors that align with those of previous generations. Their orientation, their movement through currents, and their eventual return to specific regions all reflect a continuity that does not require direct teaching. The sequence unfolds as part of their development, guided by systems that operate without conscious awareness. Generational continuity depends on this stability. The actions required for survival and reproduction must occur reliably, even in the absence of external instruction. Over time, natural selection has refined these behaviors, reinforcing those that support persistence while allowing others to fade. The result is a set of patterns that remain consistent across individuals, ensuring that the cycle can proceed. Instinct plays a central role in this process. It provides the initial framework for behavior, shaping how individuals respond to their environment from the earliest stages of life. These responses are not rigid, but they offer a foundation upon which experience can build. As each turtle interacts with its surroundings, subtle adjustments refine these behaviors, yet the underlying structure remains aligned with the needs of the species. The absence of direct memory transfer does not weaken this system. Instead, it allows for flexibility within a stable framework. Each generation encounters slightly different conditions, yet the core patterns remain adaptable enough to function across a range of environments. This balance between consistency and variation supports long-term survival, enabling the species to persist even as external conditions change. The cycle itself extends across multiple phases, from emergence to growth, migration, and return. Each phase connects to the next, forming a continuous sequence that does not rely on a single individual. When one turtle completes its role, the next generation begins, carrying forward the same patterns in a new context. The continuity lies not in the lifespan of any one individual, but in the repetition of the sequence across time. Within this system, the ocean serves as both setting and medium, supporting each stage without altering the fundamental structure of the cycle. Currents, temperature, and geography influence how the sequence unfolds, yet they do not disrupt its continuity. The turtles move through these changing conditions with behaviors that remain aligned with the broader pattern. Over countless generations, this repetition has maintained a stable presence within the marine environment. The cycle does not seek to change or improve, but to continue, preserving a way of life that has remained effective across long periods of time. Each individual contributes to this continuity, not through teaching or memory, but through participation in a sequence that extends beyond any single life. In this quiet repetition, the species persists, carried forward by instinct and structure, where each generation begins anew, yet follows a path shaped by those that came before. Time reshapes most forms through constant adjustment, yet some bodies persist with only subtle alteration, carrying forward designs that remain effective across long spans of change. Sea turtles belong to this quieter lineage, where the essential structure has endured while the world around them has shifted in climate, geography, and life itself. Their ancestors appeared millions of years ago, moving through oceans that were arranged differently from those of today. Continents have drifted, sea levels have risen and fallen, and entire ecosystems have emerged and disappeared. Through these changes, the fundamental shape of the sea turtle has remained recognizable, its core features preserved with only gradual refinement. This minimal evolutionary change does not indicate stagnation. Instead, it reflects a form that has reached a stable balance with its environment. The streamlined shell, the powerful flippers, and the internal systems that support long-distance travel have proven effective across a wide range of conditions. Rather than requiring continuous redesign, these features have continued to function within changing contexts. The ocean itself contributes to this stability. Unlike terrestrial environments, which can shift rapidly in structure and availability of resources, the marine environment often maintains broad patterns over long periods. Currents, temperature gradients, and large-scale circulation systems persist even as surface conditions vary. Within this setting, a body adapted for efficient movement and endurance remains well-suited, reducing the need for significant change. The concept of living fossils is often used to describe organisms like sea turtles, though the term can be misleading if taken to imply complete absence of evolution. In reality, changes have occurred, but they have been subtle and gradual, affecting details rather than the overall form. The underlying design has remained consistent because it continues to meet the demands of survival. This persistence highlights the relationship between form and function. When a body is well aligned with its environment, major alterations may offer little advantage. The turtle shell provides both protection and hydrodynamic efficiency. The flippers support sustained movement, and the internal systems allow for navigation, diving, and long-term endurance. Together, these features create a balance that does not require frequent adjustment. Even as the world changes, these bodies continue to operate within the same principles. They move through currents, feed within established ecological roles, and return to reproduce in ways that have been maintained across generations. The continuity of their design allows them to remain part of ecosystems that have themselves evolved, adapting through stability rather than rapid transformation. There are limits to this resilience. Environmental changes that occur too quickly or alter key conditions can challenge even well-established forms. Yet, the persistence of sea turtles across previous shifts suggests a capacity to endure within a range of variation, provided that the fundamental elements of their habitat remain accessible. The idea of ancient bodies moving through a modern world carries a sense of continuity that extends beyond individual lifespans. Each turtle represents not only its own existence, but a lineage that has passed through countless generations, maintaining a form that continues to function effectively. In this way, the presence of sea turtles today reflects a long-standing equilibrium between organism and environment. Their bodies, shaped in distant eras, remain suited to the conditions they encounter, allowing them to persist without the need for dramatic change. The ocean, though altered in many ways, still supports the design that has carried them forward, linking past and present through a form that continues to move with quiet consistency. Across the same waters that have carried them for millions of years, new elements have begun to appear, subtle at first, then increasingly present within the spaces they move through. These changes do not alter the fundamental nature of the ocean, yet they introduce conditions that did not exist through most of the turtle's long history. Floating debris now drifts within currents that once carried only natural materials. Pieces of plastic, often small and translucent, move alongside the same pathways used for feeding. Their appearance can resemble familiar prey, especially for species that consume gelatinous organisms. When ingested, these materials do not provide nourishment and can remain within the digestive system, affecting normal function over time. Other forms of pollution settle more gradually. Chemical compounds enter the water through runoff and atmospheric deposition, dispersing across wide regions. These substances can accumulate within tissues, moving through food chains and altering internal processes in ways that are not immediately visible. The effects unfold slowly, aligning with the same long timescales that define the turtles' lives. Fishing activity introduces another layer of interaction. Nets, lines, and other equipment extend through the water column, often beyond immediate visibility. Turtles moving through these areas may encounter structures that restrict movement or lead to entanglement. In some cases, this prevents them from reaching the surface to breathe, interrupting the rhythm that sustains their existence. These interactions occur within environments that otherwise remain familiar. Currents continue to flow, feeding grounds persist, and migration routes remain in place. Yet, within these stable patterns, the presence of human activity introduces variability that can alter outcomes in ways that were not part of earlier conditions. Along coastlines, additional changes affect the earliest stages of life. Artificial lighting from nearby development creates new sources of brightness that extend across the beach. For hatchlings emerging from the sand, these lights can disrupt the natural contrast that once guided their movement. Instead of orienting toward the open horizon, they may move toward inland sources, altering the direction of their first journey. This shift does not require a change in behavior, only a change in the environment. The same instinct that once guided movement correctly now responds to a different set of visual cues. The result is a misalignment between behavior and outcome, where direction remains consistent in form but leads to a different destination. Climate patterns have also begun to influence nesting conditions. Variations in temperature affect the balance within developing eggs, shifting the ratio of sexes produced in each generation. Warmer sands tend to result in a higher proportion of females, while cooler conditions produce more males. As temperatures rise, this balance can change over time, influencing future population structure. Sea levels and storm patterns alter the physical characteristics of nesting beaches. Erosion and flooding can reshape the shoreline, affecting the stability and suitability of sites that have been used across generations. These changes do not occur uniformly, but they introduce variability into places that have long remained consistent. Despite these shifts, the turtles continue to move through the ocean with the same underlying patterns that have guided them before. Their navigation, feeding, and migration remain aligned with systems that persist beneath these new influences. Yet the environment they encounter now includes elements that were not part of the original balance. In this evolving setting, the continuity of their life cycle meets conditions that are still unfolding. The ocean remains vast and structured, yet within it, new factors are present, shaping interactions in ways that extend beyond the patterns that have carried them through time. In certain places, the pattern has begun to shift again, not through natural change alone, but through deliberate efforts to preserve what has long existed. Along stretches of coastline, human presence is no longer only a source of disturbance, but also of protection, creating spaces where the conditions required for nesting can continue with fewer interruptions. These protected beaches are often defined by careful limits. Artificial lighting is reduced or redirected, allowing the natural contrast between sky and horizon to remain visible. Barriers may be placed to guide movement away from sensitive areas, while access is restricted during critical periods. The sand, which holds the earliest stages of life, is left undisturbed as much as possible, preserving the stability required for development. In these areas, the nesting process unfolds with a quiet consistency that reflects older patterns. Turtles emerge from the water, move inland, and complete the sequence without the same level of interference found elsewhere. The cycle, though still vulnerable, is given space to continue. Conservation efforts extend beyond the shoreline. Monitoring programs track movements and nesting activity, providing information that helps guide further protection. Data gathered over time reveals patterns in population size, migration routes, and reproductive success, allowing adjustments to be made where needed. These observations do not alter the behavior of the turtles, but they shape the environment in ways that support it. In some regions, signs of recovery have begun to appear. Nesting numbers show gradual increases, reflecting the combined effect of reduced disturbance and sustained protection. These changes often emerge slowly, aligning with the long life cycles of the turtles themselves. A single generation may take decades to reach maturity, so the results of conservation efforts unfold over extended periods. The presence of these recovering populations does not erase the challenges that remain. Many areas continue to experience pressures that affect survival at different stages of life. Yet the observed improvements demonstrate that the underlying systems guiding the turtles remain intact, capable of responding when conditions become more favorable. Protection also involves the reduction of specific threats. Efforts to manage fishing practices, including modifications to equipment, can decrease the likelihood of accidental capture. Cleanup initiatives address debris within coastal and marine environments, reducing the presence of materials that can interfere with feeding. These actions, though varied in approach, contribute to a gradual alignment between human activity and the needs of the species. The effectiveness of these measures depends on continuity. Short-term changes may have limited impact, but sustained efforts over time create conditions that support long-term stability. As each generation completes its cycle, the influence of protection accumulates, allowing patterns to re-establish themselves within the environment. The balance between fragility and endurance becomes more visible through these processes. Sea turtles remain sensitive to changes in their surroundings, yet their capacity to persist is evident when those surroundings are maintained within a suitable range. The same traits that have carried them through past shifts continue to operate, provided that essential conditions are preserved. In these protected spaces, the interaction between species and environment returns to a quieter state. The movements of the turtles align once more with the rhythms of the coastline and the ocean beyond, reflecting a continuity that extends across time. Within this balance, the cycle continues, shaped by both the resilience of the species and the conditions that allow it to unfold without disruption, sustaining a presence that remains closely tied to the environments it has long inhabited. Far beyond any single shoreline, the ocean continues its slow, continuous movement, carrying currents, nutrients, and life through patterns that extend across the planet. Within this vast system, sea turtles move as one part of a larger structure, their presence woven into processes that operate quietly and persist over time. Their role is not always immediately visible, yet it is present in the balance of the environments they inhabit. In some regions, their feeding shapes the growth of seagrass beds, preventing overgrowth and allowing these ecosystems to remain healthy and productive. In others, their movement between habitats transfers energy and nutrients across distances, linking areas that might otherwise remain separate. Even their nesting contributes to coastal systems, returning marine-derived nutrients to the sand and supporting organisms that live within it. These interactions do not occur in isolation. Each action connects to broader processes, influencing other species and the conditions that support them. The turtles do not control these systems, yet their presence contributes to the stability that allows them to function. Their movements, repeated across generations, become part of the rhythm that sustains the environments around them. If their numbers decline, these connections begin to shift. The effects may not appear immediately, but over time, changes in one part of the system can influence others. Seagrass may grow differently, certain prey species may increase or decrease, and the transfer of nutrients between ocean and land may lessen. The absence of a single species does not stop the ocean, but it alters the balance within it. At the same time, their continued survival reflects a capacity to persist within a changing world. Despite the pressures introduced in recent times, the underlying systems that guide their lives remain active. They continue to navigate, to feed, and to return, following patterns that have carried them through earlier changes. Their presence suggests that these patterns still hold, even as the conditions around them evolve. Beneath the surface, much of this activity remains unseen. The ocean conceals more than it reveals, holding processes that unfold without direct observation. Turtles move through this space with a quiet consistency, their lives intersecting with currents, habitats, and other species in ways that are rarely visible from above. What is observed at the surface represents only a small part of a much larger system. This sense of scale extends beyond individual species. The ocean itself remains vast, shaped by forces that operate over distances and timescales that are difficult to fully grasp. Its patterns are known in part, mapped and studied, yet still incomplete in their detail. Within this expanse, Sea turtles represent one thread among many, connected to processes that continue regardless of whether they are fully understood. Their existence does not define the ocean, yet it reflects the complexity that exists within it. A life that begins on land, moves through open water, and returns again forms part of a broader continuity that links different environments into a single system. Each stage contributes to this connection, reinforcing the relationships that sustain life within the ocean. Whether they continue in their current numbers or diminish over time, the ocean will remain, its currents will flow, its ecosystems will adjust, and its patterns will persist. Yet within that continuity, the presence of sea turtles carries a particular form of balance, one that has endured across long stretches of time. In the quiet movement beneath the surface, their journey continues, shaped by forces both known and unseen, within an ocean that remains ancient, expansive, and not yet fully understood.